The host has the recording feature on.
Welcome DISD to part 3 in the Classrooms webinar series on how do you access assessment results and find materials to support your instruction. In today's webinar, I'm going to be presenting the content from a high level via a PowerPoint, and then I'm going to go live on a demo site. At any time, you can pause the recording and try activities out on your own, and then you can restart the recording when you're ready to move on. I will also kind of do a quick review of what we did in parts 1 and 2, and those can also be accessed through the recorded links as well. So my goals for you today are to examine the various reports available to a teacher to analyze student performance on assessments and then access correlated materials. And then we will also show you how to create a student group. As in the past, you can find lots of helpful resources. We have loaded a variety of materials into PD Planner under Resources, and you can search for SchoolNet or search for the actual module you're looking at, which is Classrooms. We have quick reference cards. We have some end-user PowerPoints. You can also access help throughout the application anytime you see a little orange question mark in a circle, and it's really nice because it's screen specific, so it's contextualized for that page that you are on. If you are interested in any hardware or software requirements, you can click on the System Requirements link in the footer of any screen. So in parts 1 and 2 of the Classrooms module, we showed you kind of a brief introduction or an introduction to the instructional materials side of Classrooms. We searched for materials, and as we discussed, DISD has loaded lots of curriculum maps. You can search for resources. You can search for resources for students. We also created materials. We created a lesson plan. We created a resource. We showed how to schedule in the lesson planner. And then in the end of part 2, we also showed you the student workspaces, which is where the students could log in and actually create a digital portfolio. So in reviewing the searching options, there are several ways that you can search for materials, but one of the ways is searching by standard. And as we get further into the reporting today, we're actually going to be looking at particular standards and then finding materials that support that standard. But if you know the exact standard you want to teach, you can search and find out from the chart how many different types of materials we have available in the system. Any material in the system that's tagged that it's for students can then be assigned to students. So we reviewed how you could actually assign a resource to a student, and again, students can use the system. It's just a matter of if you have computers available for them to access. And then we reviewed how to create a lesson and how to create a resource and discuss the different types of fields, and that it's important to align standards because, as you will see when we go through the reporting process and the standards alignment, we want to find materials to help support our instruction, whether it be at the kind of in the beginning of a lesson or at the end of a lesson. We can see how our students are doing aligned to that standard. Anything that you search and save or you create on your own is accessible in your own materials bank, so you'll be able to access that at any time. And then we discuss student workspaces. Now, student workspaces is a little different than assigning resources to students. It's two kind of separate areas, but it really allows the student to create kind of their own digital portfolio. And teachers have the ability to access these workspaces of students, and they can comment on them. They can kind of trade back and forth different materials. And we did the student workspace in actually part 2. So again, if you have the infrastructure and you have computers available, it's a great way for students to upload materials for teachers to access. And then we also showed you the lesson planner, and I'll briefly demonstrate a portion of that today, because you'll also have the ability when you're looking at test results to schedule some standards coverage on the actual lesson planner. And in the part one, when we discussed it, we talked about how you can schedule lesson plans and kind of special events all on your lesson planner. So all of these features were discussed in part 1 and 2. So now let's talk about classroom level reporting and aligning and looking at the materials that we kind of created and looked at in the prior sessions. So anytime you log into SchoolNet as a teacher, you're brought to the home page, or what we call the My SchoolNet page. And this page is going to reflect your current students for the desired section that you select, and then you have the ability to view rosters and test results for all of the students in that section. You also are able to see any standardized test information. And as you can see from my screen, these are all the different tests that are available in the system, and we go back to the 2012-2013 school year. So if you were teaching in the higher grades, you'll have standardized test results that go back that far for your students. If you have administered any assessments in the system using the Assessment Admin module, those results will show up in what we call either the benchmark dashboard or the classroom test dashboard. Now, these are tests that actually have to be administered within SchoolNet, and the difference between the two are benchmark is a district or a school assessment that's been administered, and a classroom test is a test that you as the teacher might have administered. Either way, either type of test that you look at, you'll be able to get some additional reports. And over to the left, you can see these 3 tabs are the different types of reports that you can access. The first one is what we call our standards mastery. And what this report does is it takes all of the items that are on the assessment and group it by standard. And it will tell you how that section of students did by score group on that standard. It'll tell you the number of items there that were on the test that was for that standard, and then here's the breakdown of the student grouping. Now when we go live, you'll see that I'm going to talk more about this section, but this will link you to any materials, which is the M, that has instructional materials that correlate to that standard. So based on how your students did, you can easily access some additional material to support your instruction. The little kind of calendar with the plus sign will then allow you to actually schedule that standards coverage. So if you did a pre-assessment on a particular standard and wanted the students to work on it every few days, you can click on that scheduling option and schedule it into your lesson planner. Now, anytime you click on that number, you're then brought to what we call student mastery grouping. And in here, you can see the student names that fall into each of these kind of score groups. And a little later on in the webinar, we're going to talk about how we could create these groups into what we call student groups. But what we'll talk about when we go live is up here in the top right corner, where you'll be able to access any related materials that correlate to any of the skills or sub-skills. So again, if there are resources that correlate to this standard, they will appear when you click on that related materials link. Another report that we'd like to look at is the item analysis. And this is basically taking that same report and it's showing us how each student did on that particular question or item. and you'll be able to see what the student answered, and it'll be checked off if it's correct or red if it's incorrect. And at any time, you can drill into the actual standard that it's aligned to and get a link to instructional materials and resources. There is one other report that we're going to demonstrate when we go live, and that's called the skills analysis. And that basically takes the standards mastery report and the item analysis and brings it kind of into the individual students and how he or she scored on the particular skill. So I'm now going to go live as a teacher onto my demo site. And as I log in, you're going to see I'm brought to my home page, and I am this teacher, and these are all the different sections I choose. So when I click on any of these, I can change any of these sections if I wish. And all of the information down below here will change to match that section I'm looking at. So if I want to go to the first pre-algebra section that I teach, I can, and it'll take me and show me how that group of students did. Now when we look at reporting right here, or assessments, you can see I can look at district and local tests, which are the school or district tests. I can look at classroom tests, and I have administered some tests at my classroom level. And then I can also look at standardized tests. And when I look at the standardized tests, this is showing me my current students for this pre-algebra section. And then they're going to show me the test name, and if I have any other test name, this drop-down would show up. But since now it's going to tell me that of all of these students, I have, certain percentages, scored proficiency in these three sections of the standardized test. So I have math selected. I can click on reading, and the scores down below will correlate, and it will show me how my students did on each section. So again, I can click on math, or I can click on the writing, and it'll tell me how my students did by score group. Now if I change my section here, it'll then show me this section, the percentage proficient, and again, if I looked at reading, you'll see that I have different score group coloring here. Now there is a link right here to what we call standards mastery, and this is what's going to take me to more detail of the standardized test. And this is really just going to give me the numbers and how the student scored on the particular test. I can change the date to the actual test date, and as you can see here, I get the numbers of how the student scored by score group. This is how the data is coming in. But we really want to focus on how can we support our instruction. So I'm going to change my section here, and I actually, once I get into what we call classroom student performance right here, I'm able to see that I can select all of like my pre-algebra sections or my math sections. So as a teacher, if I teach more than one section of a subject, I'll be able to see all the students that correlate. So I'm going to look at my benchmark dashboard. When I click on the benchmark dashboard here, this is going to show me any test that was administered at the district level or school level. And I can click on whenever there's kind of like a caret at the end here, I can click on this caret and get some more detail. Up at the top, I can filter it, so maybe I just want to see, since I'm a math teacher, just my math assessments, because this is going to show me any assessments the students took in my section. So I can click on the plus sign here, or sorry, the caret here, and it's going to expand it, and it's going to tell me kind of the overall how my students did. So I had 35 students that took this assessment that has 15 test items in it. This is how my section did overall by the standard. That's compared to the whole school, compared to the feeder, compared to the district. So as you can see here on this one particular standard, we did much better than the district as a whole. Overall, we did much better as a district as a whole as well, but you can compare it by standard. Now, if I wanted to, I can click on any one of these links to the standard here, and what I'm going to see is the standard in detail, and I'll be able to get any materials. This was a standard that didn't have any materials. Let me click on one that does. Click on this one. So from here, I can see any materials that are going to support instruction. So if I know I need to work on this standard, then I'll be able to get materials right from the chart, lesson plan, resources. So let's go into the reports a little bit more. So as I mentioned, we have a standards mastery for standardized tests, when we can also get it for benchmark tests. We also have the skills analysis and the item analysis. So I'm just going to click on standards mastery. Now what's going to show a little bit different about this report is I'm going to actually see the particular standard that was on the assessment along with the number of items and then the breakdown of how the student did overall. Now I can click on any of these numbers and get to the score group, get to the student grouping, or I can also access the materials that will support the instruction. So as I look at this bottom standard here, I can see that on this test, we had 5 items aligned to this standard. But it seems that 26 out of the possible number of items or students that took it were needs improvement or unsatisfactory. So I'm going to really need to kind of beef up and start to work on my instruction on this particular standard. So I can click on this M right here, and what it's going to do is it's going to take me to any materials that either I have or that the system has available to me to support this instruction. So here's that standard, and now I actually have 2 lesson plans, I have a resource, so I can click directly on these and I can then access that material and I'll have a lesson or activity ready to go for my students. So it's really, really powerful for you as a teacher to go in and access these results and then click on that related materials and access any materials that are going to help you support your instruction. The other option I can do is I can just click on the number, and now I can see who the students are that fell into each of these score groups. And just like I mentioned in the PowerPoint, if I click on this related materials, I'm going to be taken to basically the same page that shows me all the different materials that correlate to that standard to, again, support my instruction and keep the learning, fresh and ready at kind of my fingertips. So at this point, I'm going to allow you to pause the recording, and I want you to look at just the standards mastery. You can look at the standardized test access or a report, and I want you then to look at a benchmark test if you have some data. And there are a lot of tests in the system, so you should be able to access that. And when you're ready to move on, we will then look into skills analysis and item analysis and actually scheduling that standard in the lesson planner. So hopefully you've had a chance to look at the standards mastery. And now I'm going to go back to the site, and I'm going to talk about how to schedule a standard and then how to view the other 2 reports. So I'm going to kind of start from the beginning on this one. I'm going to go to Classroom, Student Performance, and I'm going to go to Benchmark Dashboard. And from here, I can sort it by the subject area. And then I can find tests that was administered that I want to get some additional detail on. And then we selected standards mastery. So now let's look at item analysis and skills analysis. When I click on item analysis, it's going to default to this actual test, and it's going to show me how each of my students did on all 15 of those items. So I can see all my students, and anything with a green check mark means they got it correct. Anything in red tells me that it was incorrect and what their incorrect response was. I can click on this caret right here, and it's going to show me how on this particular item, how my section did as compared to the school, the whole feeder, as well as the district. I can click on the item itself, and if I actually have the content of the item, I can see what the students, maybe where the students might have gotten a little tripped up. So it will help me to kind of teach to the question or to the standard. And then as you look here, I have an M right here. And when I click on that M, it's going to take me to that standard detail, to the chart, and it will show me any materials that correlate to that particular standard. So anytime you drill into content of your items or your standards and you see that little M right there, it's going to allow you to get a little bit more detail. I'll scroll down to the bottom as well, and what you can see here is it's actually going to tell you which item was correlate to which standard. And since I know that there are some resources aligned to 8.4, if I click on question 10, I'm going to get to see the content, and then I get to see kind of my score distribution, and then the link to the standard detail right here. And there are all kind of the materials that are aligned to the standard that will help me, work on this concept. So I'm going to go back a few, go into my item detail. Oops, sorry, my item analysis, should I say. And now let's look at skills analysis. Click on skills analysis, and basically what the skills analysis does is it's combining kind of the standards mastery report and the item analysis. I can see how each of my students did at the skill level, or even the subsection level, or the section level. Like clicking on any one of these, I'm going to be able to kind of expand to the lowest level. So I can see the overall average and then how each student did on that particular skill. So I can see there was a total of 5 points for this subsection or sub-skill, should we say, and you can see that they got 3 out of 5 or 60%. And just like we've gone to the other fields down below, it's going to actually give you a list of what those standards are, or we could feasibly just click right on the standard itself, and it's going to take you to the detail. And again, this is the list of any resources or lesson plans that will correlate to that standard. So what I just demonstrated was using basically the same assessment, and we had done standards mastery. We looked at item analysis and then skills analysis. So at this point, I want you to pause the recording and practice on your own accessing the skills analysis and the item analysis. And when you're ready to move on, just restart the recording. Okay, so hopefully you had a chance to look at all the different reports. And now, based on that research, we want to schedule standards coverage in our lesson planner. I'm going to go back to my Standards Mastery report right from here. So when I click on Standards Mastery, I'm on the same assessment, but I see here that there's a little schedule icon. And as I hover over, it says Schedule Standards Coverage. So when I click on that, it's going to prompt me, and as we discussed kind of similar in part 1, you'll have to choose the calendar that you'll want to schedule it on. So maybe I want to schedule it to the section I'm looking at. So I choose that section, and I say I want to schedule it for today, and then I can either save and close or save and go to the planner. So when I say save and go to the planner, it's going to bring me to that particular section, and right away I'm going to see here that that standard is scheduled for this section that I taught. Now I can also schedule standards coverage straight from the lesson planner. So if I know what standard I want to look at, I can choose math here. The list will show up. I teach algebra. I can expand it, expand a little bit more, and then I could feasibly drop the actual activity, and I can call this my, standard coverage. Oops, fix some spelling errors. 111 pre-algebra. And if I had any notes, maybe I'll say, page 25 in teacher guide, or whatever my book might be, or handout. I could even, maybe say it's in a handout of sorts. I can expand down, and because I kind of, selected the standard over here and kind of dragged it over to this date, it will appear there. I exit out, and it's now going to show up right there. Now, if I teach multiple sections of the same course, again, we went over this in part 1. If I select this, I can see that now I'm looking at it by week. That's my choice. And I can drag and drop to have the same coverage in all of that I teach. Now, if I wanted to, I could go back to my classroom student performance, access the scheduling icon right here, and say I want to put this in my second section of algebra for the 11th. I'm going to choose save and close on this one. And then I'm going to access the planner directly from my classroom lesson planner. And now I can see there's that standards coverage, there's that standards coverage I brought in from the Standards Mastery report. So at this point, I'm going to ask you to pause the recording and kind of explore through scheduling from Standards Mastery. So I want you to be in your classroom student performance, Standards Mastery, and access the scheduling here and schedule in your lesson planner. And when you're ready to move on, just restart the recording. So now I'm going to demonstrate about or talk about student grouping. So as you saw in the report, we were able to see in the Standards Mastery that there's a group of students that fell into one score group. And then when we looked at skills analysis and item analysis, we were able to see the individual student responses and know how they did at the individual level. So one of the nice features with the system is I have the ability to create student groups based on these results. And I can print out the list of students and have a resource teacher or do small grouping in the classroom, or I can run some additional reports if the system has them loaded or has them kind of accessible. So the way to get to it is either individually from the reports, you can individually select a student, or we can do the grouping. So what I'm going to do is go back to my Classrooms Student Performance, and I'm going to click on Standards Mastery. And from here, based on the same test I was looking at, I can see all of my score groups here. So I can see these 16 students need improvement on the Pythagorean theorem. So I can click on this 16, and from here, I have the option to just select we call it a radio button or a selector right in front of the needs improvement group, and then I have the option to create a group from here. When I say add to group, I say new group, and then I select go. And from here, I'm going to give it a name, and then if I wanted to, I can give the category, so obviously they needs improvement. And since it knows that I've selected 16 students that are in this needs improvement section, it's going to automatically add those students to that section, that group. So I'm going to save it. And now maybe I want to add maybe 1 or 2 students that may be falling in the unsatisfactory, kind of score grouping, but I don't want them all. So I could feasibly go to my skills analysis. So when I go to Classroom Student Performance, and this time choose Skills Analysis, and I'm going to either, view all as kind of the subsection level or even the sub level, which is the 8.4, which is the Pythagorean theorem. I can see on these results maybe the few students that really did poorly, and I individually add 1 or 2 students. I'm individually that I want to add to that group I just created. And then I can either, then I can scroll up and you'll see that I have the Add to Group option here. And when I click on the drop down, there's my group name. I select the name and I say go, and the system's going to say, do you want to add 4 students to this group? And I'm going to go ahead and select Save. So now what I've done is I've kind of created a group of students, and what do I want to do with that group? So I'm going to hover over Classrooms here, and I'm going to go into my area called Student Groups. And in this Student Groups section, I'm able to see there's my group name, here are all the 20 students that are in it, when was it created, I did give it a category, I can even search by just the student name, and I can see the group that the student is in. If the students are in multiple groups that I've created, all the names will show up here. So I'm going to go back to group name, I'm going to click on the name, and now I'm going to get some detail about it. So I can edit the detail of the group itself. When I click on Edit, I can see the category, I can see grade, subject, and then I have some associated standards if I want to align to it. And since I know it's the Pythagorean theorem, I'm going to go ahead and select anything to do with measurement. So when I select the standard itself, it kind of, select all the standards below it. If I select it again, it's going to deselect it. I can individually select standards if I like, but if you select the text itself, it's going to select that skill and then all the sub-skills below it. So whatever you want to select, you just click on the box in front for the text itself, and then we can choose Save. And now I still have all the information, but I've added in some standards that I want to work with these students. Now let's say some of the students have moved on from needing improvement. They've actually exceeded. I can go ahead and edit the students, and it says they're all currently enrolled, But what I could do is I could click on students and then remove them, and then it's just going to completely take those students out of the group. I'm going to choose Save, and now I went down from 20 students to 16. So the last option that you can do is, now that you have this group, I could feasibly print this out and have it available to me when I want to do small groups, or when I go into Classrooms, Student Performance, I have a tab here called Student Analysis. So when I click on Student Analysis, I can see if there's any reports that we have kind of published, or I can create my own. And this button right here is going to allow me to run any reports using that student group. So if I use the existing report, these are just kind of student ID columns, and it's going to show me that it's the result of I'm seeing 50 of 56 students, but now I only want to run it with that student group, and I bet you it's only going to show me 16 because I only had 16 students in that actual group. So I can view all the students in my section, or if I have created a student group, I can run it straight from there. I can run just those students in the group by selecting this. So how do you get rid of a group once you've completed it? When I hover over Classrooms, Student Groups, I find that group itself, and right from the student group details, I'm going to choose Edit here, I have the option to delete my group from here. So once I delete this, all of those students and the information aligned to it will be removed, and I'll no longer have any student groups. So when I hover over student groups, you'll see that I don't have any student groups. So at this point, I want you to pause the recording and try to create your own student group, and then we will come back to review where you can get all the materials I just demonstrated. So hopefully you've had a chance to explore through grouping. And that's pretty much it for our instruction, but I do want to show you where you are going to find materials to support everything I showed you today. So when you hover over Educator Development and you do a PD search, the fastest way to find resources is to click on Resources. This is where any of the kind of workshops are and things. And then I can start typing in the word Classroom, since that's the module we're working with. And it's a type ahead field, so now I can see all the different resources that we have available. There's a skills analysis report, item analysis report, there's student groups, how do you use a lesson planner, all of the kind of step-by-step guides of what I demonstrated are available here. So I want to thank you very much for your time. And as you know, all these webinars, if you weren't able to attend any prior ones, will all be available in PD Planner for you to go back and review. And thank you, and we look forward to seeing you again.